I was to conduct a funeral in Brandon when I asked the elderly widow about the service, what she would like. And she said, "Reverend, keep it short and use his name a lot." Mary was wandering around in a fog, as you heard in the text. She had run to Jesus' grave in the dark, and when she found nothing there, she ran back for Peter and the other disciples. But on seeing the tomb was empty, they headed home. So there she was, standing in the garden alone, having wept when talking to the angels, and now she was not really sure what had happened to her. But Jesus had clearly gone. She was likely at that stage when you throw up your hands and just say, "Too much information." What she'd learned that Easter morning was overwhelming. Too much, really, for one person to comprehend in that moment. Jesus, who has died, was now missing from the grave. Go figure. Nothing had prepared her or even the disciples for this moment. No one among any of Jesus' friends or followers had realized that this might even happen. But the truth was staring her in the face, that somehow he had popped out of the burial clothes and there was no sign of him, except for this gardener hanging around the rose bush. And then everything in her life turned on a name, her name. Up until that moment, she heard the gardener say, "Mary." She's out of it, in a fog, unknowing, uncertain, even afraid of the way ahead. And then he calls to her, "Mary." And in that instant, she knows that it's her beloved Jesus. He is not dead. He has not gone missing. He is there with her forever. When have you heard your name called? At a graduation ceremony, waiting in a lineup, walking through the grocery aisles, sitting in a cafe, getting married, or maybe it was when you were confirmed. As my old friend Marion Milne notes well, no one can say your name like someone who loves you. There is that standing at the crowd in the airport and they keep calling your name over the loudspeaker, but you never hear it. And when you finally get to the counter, they look at you and they ask, "Didn't you hear us calling your name?" And then there's hearing your name called by someone who loves you. A voice that's so familiar, so real, that were time to run its course, you would remember that voice calling your name even in heaven. It happened to be Easter Sunday morning when I was at Bell's Corners, and how the hallway outside of the minister's office led directly into the sanctuary. And it was really only wide enough, that hallway, for 3 people across. So when I opened the door to go out, it was jam-packed with people. And as I walked out into the crowd, I heard this voice calling my name, "Brian, Brian." And I'm kind of looking around to see who in this crowd is calling my name, when I spotted little 4-year-old Matt calling my name, and when my eyes met his, he came running over and gave me the biggest hug, and then off he went with his parents. One of the great gifts of post-vaccine, post-pandemic, will be the gift of hugging those who you love, like children and grandchildren and old friends. Jesus didn't really want a hug in that moment, as you heard, because he said that he was headed off to the Father. But I like to think that he and Mary's first impulse was to run to each other when they heard their names and embrace each other in a hug. Because somehow this story conveys an intimacy that is connected to the hearing and the calling of one's name. I know you so well. I've been with so much with you. I feel this kinship, something more than just being a friend or even a relative, but a deep connection, by God's immense grace. On Thursday, I had a call from my old friend, Dr. Tom Shapiro, whom I hadn't spoken to personally for about 6 years. And when he heard my voice, he said, "That sounds like Brian Copeland." And I said, "That sounds like Tom Shapiro." And we both laughed. And it was truly comforting to hear his voice again. Did Mary feel that way? After all the excitement, disbelief, uncertainty, fear, weeping, out of the blue comes a voice that she knows and she loves, and all is made well and right. That is Easter in the soul. When through the crowd, you hear your name called, and it's one whom you know, one whom you love, one who brings you comfort and joy. How do you know that Jesus has left the tomb? How do you know that he's alive and risen and here for us 2,000 years later? Because strangely, we still hear him calling our name. He's the one who loves us forever. He's the one who walks with us to our final breath. He is the one who knows what needs that fuel our desires. Jesus simply calls your name, and he lives for you. In that experience of a presence which we cannot explain, in a voice which calls to us in the night, in the sound of our name at a moment of great change, we hear Jesus say it quietly and beautifully. And then, like Mary, we know. We find ourselves lifted from the fog of life, and we have faith that he is indeed here with us now and always. Thanks be to God. Amen.